What's up and welcome back to another video, guys. Today I have put together a Lego castle slash medieval CMF. Now I did this before about a month ago, and when I did make that video I said that there was a possibility of a Lego medieval CMF coming out, but now that we have the revealed Lego D&D CMF, I think the possibility of a Lego medieval themed or Lego castle or fantasy themed CMF has gone up a ton. I think it is likely that we do see one in the coming years. So I've put together another little bit of a CMF to mimic something that I would like to see or think that we would see from Lego. So without further ado, let's get right on into this. The first minifigure that we have is a young Black Falcon's prince. I've made him using the Falconer's cape just because I really like how it sits and is kind of like off-centered. I think it looks really cool. I used this torso from a Star Wars minifigure. I forgot who it came from. I think it came from the Ambush on Ferric set though. And then just the legs from a normal Black Falcon's knight. I gave him a nice head with a mustache and Anakin Skywalker's hair and a long sword. I have him holding like that to kind of represent that it is sheathed, but there isn't really a sheath piece. I suppose there is one that came out in the Pirates of the Caribbean sets, but I do not have any on hand. But that it would be a really cool piece to see reintroduced. I think this figure goes together really nicely. I think it's very clean, and I really like that blue color scheme, and it really kind of does mimic what a prince maybe would have worn, and I think it does look really cool, and I really like the highlights of orange on it, even though it doesn't really fit the Black Falcon's color scheme. Next up, we have a Wolfpack Archer made using that Wolfpack torso, dual molded legs, a nice cape, a quiver, a hood, and a bow. Now, I think this one comes together very nicely, and I know it's kind of a boring one to include because ideally, if Lego was to put forward a castles-themed or just medieval-themed CMF, it would be full of new, never-seen-before factions, and I have tried to do that, but I do think that they would also shed some light on the already existing factions, and I think this would be a really cool one to get. I do really like how this came together, especially by adding in the arm from the Falconer. It really looks like that little gauntlet that an archer would have to protect their forearm from getting hit by the string of the bow, and I do think that this figure looks really nice. Our next minifigure leans a little bit more on the fantasy side of things. We have a bit of an orc here. I made him just using a normal little head, and then I took the torso off of a Jawa and gave him some nice green arms and the legs from Han Solo. Now, I do think that the use of the Viking helmet here isn't perfect, but I do think that it works, and I really like how it looks with the rest of the color scheme of this figure. And I also brick built this little weapon here. Oops, he fell. It is a little long for him, I will say, and ideally it would be a little shorter, that chain, but I did want to go for a bit of a different view on the weapons just because I feel like I give everyone swords, so I thought giving a nice brick built weapon would be a nice change of pace, and I would love to see some more orcs in some future Lego sets. Next up, we have the Bat Knight, a loyal follower of Basil, the Bat Lord, equipped with a bat axe, a very detrimental weapon to fight against, and just a nice little black shield that I spray painted. Now, if Lego was to do this, I would hope for a nice custom printing. I just really don't have a way to do that, so I just spray painted it black to fit the color scheme. He uses this random little armor piece and a nice little headpiece from Basil, the Bat Lord, and I think it looks really nice and really cool. He also has the head of a Jawa under there, but I do think that this figure came together really cool, and it would be super cool to army build. Next, we have a Black Falcon's Mage. I think that this figure came along pretty well. It uses the Falconer's legs with a normal Black Falcon's torso, and then just a black cape and hood. And then I gave him a nice little brick-built wand with a blue gem to kind of match the color scheme. And I'm pretty sure this piece comes from one of the Gungan sets, but I thought that it could be a cool, magically generated shield, and I thought that it looked really cool. And I think it would be nice to get some more kind of fantasy leaned-in characters like mages and stuff like that, because I think that they are very cool. Next up, we have a lord or some sort of royal. I think he looks really cool. That uses the torso of Grief Karga, and I think it works very, very well. And I also really like the brown cape, how it kind of molds together with all the other colors. I gave him just a little sword in that sheathed position and a nice little hairpiece. I think this figure turned out pretty good, and it is nice to get some of more background-oriented characters, I guess, and not just a bunch of knights and stuff. Next up, we have a member of the Lion Knights Royal Guard tasked with protecting the king. I think this figure came along pretty good and would be really fun to army builds. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of the Lion Knights as a faction. I think they are, in my opinion, probably the worst looking faction, but I do think this figure came out pretty cool, and I do really like all of the accessories that he has, and it would be a very fun one to army build. Next up, we have the Black Falcons King, a younger man who likes to lead his soldiers headfirst rather than behind the safety of his castle, maybe against the will of his advisors. They don't like him when he puts himself in danger, but I really like the use of the little bit of like gold chrome kind of headpiece crown right there. I think it's really cool, and I would love to see it reintroduced. Lego has to be able to come up with a way where it's not going to tarnish. Now this is like, I'm pretty sure this piece itself, when I got it on Bricklink, I think it's like a 15-year-old piece, and it's in really good condition. So I understand why they don't do the chrome anymore, but I do think that they can definitely reintroduce it, and I think it would be perceived very well. Now ideally we'd get a better cape than this custom one that I have made, but I do think this figure is a really cool one, and I would love to get different like leadership, like kings and queens for all of the different factions. And we can't have a king without his loyal hand. I made him using the backside of the Falconers, Black Falconers torso, and I think that printing on the back looks really, really nice and comes together. And then I also used the legs from the Bard minifigure, and as well as the arms. I gave him a nice little book with some important information, and then just a nice little gray hair piece and a black cape. I think this figure came along pretty good, and I think it would be a really cool and fun one to get. Next, we have a custom faction that I have deemed the Squirrel Knights. Another one of those like foresty kind of knights, but I'm not a big fan of the forest men, so I created my own with a nice little tan, dark reddish orange kind of color scheme to match the color of a squirrel, and some nice wooden tools. Now I would like to see a very nice shield print on this, but I did not have the ability to do that. And then just some armor and a small brown cape. I think this would be really cool, and I would love to see a ton of new factions come out from Lego. Next, we have an undead mage who has lost himself in search of immortality and now has the powers to raise people from the dead to create an undead army. I think it would be cool to get some sort of like dark opposition for some of these knights to fight against. He is made using, I believe that is one of Cole's torsos from Ninjago, a little Batman cape just because I thought it looks cool, just a random pair of printed black legs that I found, one of the newer capes, and a skeleton head, and this brick-built staff with a nice red gem that I think contrasts very well. I think this would be a really cool figure to get. Next up, we have a simple merchant using the body and legs from Cassian Endor and the head and hair from the tax collector. I have equipped him with a bag and some money, bag full of goodies, and he is on his way to sell them for a nice little profit. I think it would be nice to get just some, like, not necessarily peasants, but just some of the common folk. It would be a nice break from all of the knights and other things like that. Next up, we have a Viking Warrior. I think he turned out pretty cool in that gray color scheme. It uses the back of one of the Star Wars torsos with some dual molded legs, and then just a Viking helmet and a nice beard, and a brick-built axe using a spear. I thought it was a cool little weapon, and a rounded shield. Now, like I said before, ideally all of these custom shields would have some sort of nice print. I just don't have a way to do that, but I think it would be nice to get some more Vikings to army build. I think they're very cool, and I would love to see some more of them. Another simple but necessary minifigure that we have here is a blacksmith, just used with that apron piece and some nice brown legs. I have equipped him with a sword that he is forging with his nice hammer and a small brick-built anvil. I know that this one's kind of boring, but I do think it would be a very fun one to include in a CMF. Next up, we have a vampire hunter. This is used using one of the bounty hunter's bodies and legs from Star Wars with a brown cape and a brown hood. I have equipped him with a silver stake to take out the vampires, as well as a bottle of holy water. I think this would be a very fun one. I'm not sure if I love the color scheme that I went for, but I think the idea is there, and I think it would be a very fun one to get, as well as reintroducing a bit of a chrome piece. I think that would go very well to represent the silver stake that he would have to use to kill a vampire. Next up, we have a Lord of a Land. I think this figure looks really nice using that tax collector body and legs. I really love the purple color scheme, so I try my best to do what I can with this figure. Now, I don't think he works great for like army building, some sort of faction, but I do think it does fit that kind of royal color scheme just because purple is a very royal color. So I think that this guy works very well with that slicked back black hair and a black cloak. I think this figure looks really cool and would be a very fun one to get in a CMF. Next up, we have a Baker. I made her using just, these are the skirt piece from Emperor Palpatine, actually, or Chancellor Palpatine, and then just one of the minifigure torsos from the medieval markets, and just a random head and piece of hair. I've given her a croissant and a little knife. I think this figure turned out really good, and I do think that it would be nice to get some more common folk in the CMF. It would be a nice change of pace, and you really can't build up your castle mocks if you don't have the people to fill it up with. Next, we have another kind of custom knight faction. I imagine these guys come from a very cold, snowy place, hence the color scheme. He's made using one of the Imbaran's little torso pieces, some dual molded legs, a random cloak that I found. I don't think it's Lego. I'm pretty sure it's some custom thing. Just a little arm, shoulder piece, and a nice head and hair combo. The shield I spray painted a little bit of like a speckled design, which I think looks really cool. But like I said before, it would be cool if all of these had some nice unique printing to, you know, signify the factions, and just a small sword. I think this guy came together pretty good and would be a pretty cool one to get an army build. And the last figure in this CMF, we have a Black Falcons crossbowman. I know that this one is kind of a boring one once again to just get another figure from an existing faction already, but I do think it would be a cool one to get. Now, I know that we did already get the Falconer in a previous CMF, but I just had to include another Black Falcons in just because they are my favorite faction, so I am a bit biased. This was a simple one, just using the Black Falcon's torso and the legs with a small black cape and hood, a crossbow, and a quiver. I think this guy turned out really cool. And that was my custom rendition of a Lego Castle CMF. If they were to make one, I would love to see something like this. Comment down below what your favorite figure was, or what figures that you would like to see involved in a Lego Castle CMF if they were to release one. Thank you all so much for watching. Stay safe. Drew, signing out.